Hey, so hello and welcome to Grief Unedited. This is a space where we're going to have a real and honest, raw conversation about grief and the reality of it. I'm your host, Karen Lafferty. I'm an accredited counsellor specialising in grief, and I've worked with people for over a decade, helping them to navigate their journey through loss. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm at Continuum Counselling on both sites. Or my website is www.continuumcounselling.com. I wanted to just be clear that today's podcast is for educational purposes only, and any views that I express during the conversation are my own and they don't represent any third parties that I work on behalf of or with. And lastly, just a bit of a content warning for our episode today. Obviously, these conversations are real, they are unedited, so please use your own discretion. And if you're finding any of the content triggering in any way, just take a bit of a break from it and give yourself some space. As we know, grief can be really overwhelming, so just listen to your own wisdom and listen to what helps and what doesn't for you. And with grief being grief, there might also be some sweary words thrown in, so maybe best not to listen along if you've got little ears in the background. And today's episode, I am delighted to introduce the lovely Andrea Clare. And today we're going to be talking a bit about love and loss, a journey through grief. So, Andrea, can I hand over to you and let you, just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks, Karen. So, hi, I'm Andrea, and I can promise there won't be any sweary words. I'm of a generation where I wasn't allowed to swear, so I tried to keep this PC. I'm an artist, and I'm actually the menopause artist. So I use art to help women understand and navigate their menopause journey. And as I've already mentioned, menopause is also a topic around grief and loss. So, yeah. And I am a mum as well of 3 children. I'm a single parent now. And I suppose you could also say I'm an orphan, which is an old-fashioned term, but it certainly does apply, I think, still when you've not got any parents remaining.
Yeah.
So, and so I've had, a varied experience of loss over my life, for sure.
Would it be helpful to maybe start by telling us a wee bit then about your experience of grief? What's it felt like for you? What's been your relationship to loss? Because I know when we had a quick chat before we come on, it's like you've had different experiences of loss that might be useful to give a bit of landscape to.
Yeah, so I suppose my first encounter with loss was when I was a young child, and my uncle suddenly passed away, and then my grandma. But because I was so young, my parents really didn't include me in any of the conversations, or I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. So I really didn't appreciate what was going on. So that was, my first experience. And then the next loss I experienced was of a family pet.
Okay.
And because it wasn't my own pet, it was my parents. And at that stage, I'd moved away to study. I wasn't as emotionally involved. Yes, it was sad, but it wasn't as sad as it's been when I've lost my own pet since. Yeah. So that was my early experience of it. And then I also lost a school friend when I was 13 suddenly. And that was really that was a tough one, more in the sense of watching her parents grieving. I think sometimes, depending upon the person that you've lost, how close they are to you, it's more seeing the impact it has upon other people. I found that very, very upsetting, to see that, to see the parents of the child that had passed. In terms of my immediate family, so I don't have any brothers or sisters. I'm just me, and my father passed away suddenly just before the millennium in
All right.
1999. It was sudden, and it was it was really it was hard because it was emotional, got upset. I also found the most upsetting thing for me was I didn't get down to England in time from
Mm,
Scotland, and then I actually saw his body in the morgue, and yes, it was the morgue.
mm.
That was quite shocking, and that's something I wish I hadn't done, because that's how I kind of remembered my dad,
Remember
because that
them.
was
Yeah.
the last time I saw him.
Mm.
But immediately after it, it was just my mum and I, and I found it very it was tough, because the grief that my mum was experiencing was very different to the grief that I was experiencing, because I was
Absolutely.
experiencing it as a daughter, she was experiencing it as a life partner.
Yeah.
And because I don't have any brothers or sisters, I thought, well, nobody understands how I'm feeling. My mum obviously was there to support me, but she was feeling a different way, and she might have felt the same. But we were a great support to each other, and my mum was very pragmatic, and uh, she had lived through Second World War, and been
Wow.
evacuated, and so when it came to going to the undertakers to get the coffin for my dad, I mean, I think the undertakers were a bit startled, because we were very upbeat about it, and
Like,
yeah,
what's going on?
I suppose it was our way of coping with the situation,
Mm.
and we were very practical in the organising everything. He'd done no preparation for his funeral,
Okay.
um, and that was really difficult. Trying to work out what music to pick, and the format of the service. Um, and yeah, so we kind of laughed our way through it, I suppose. But
Mm.
then when it came to the funeral, it was very, very sad. But I suppose I've always felt like I was in a supporting role,
Yeah.
in the sense
Yeah.
that I was allowed to grieve, but I had to stay strong for my mum.
For mum. Yeah.
So my dad passed away, and then um, my mum was left on her own, and she thought that she would be able to spend time with my auntie, her sister. But then my auntie got vascular dementia,
Okay. Gosh.
and that is a double loss in a way,
Yeah.
because you lose the person before they actually pass away.
Yeah.
And I'd been really very close to my auntie, and it was really difficult watching a person that that you loved, and had an amazing relationship with, to their personality to change completely.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that was actually a big loss, caused by dementia. When she actually passed away, because she was 9 years with vascular dementia.
Wow.
When she passed away, in some ways it was a relief, because it wasn't the person that I had known.
I think
With
that feeling sometimes catches people by surprise, that
yeah,
sense of relief that, as you say, like that's 9 years of watching her, just change over time and not be the
and
woman that you knew and loved. And yeah, I think sometimes
yeah,
that relief can bring about guilt of like, is that okay to feel that? Where's that?
that's it. And it was also putting an awful lot of pressure upon my mum as well,
Okay.
to go and visit her. Although obviously she wanted to do that, but I could
Mm.
see that the impact it was having upon my mum. So, yeah, dementia is causes, as I say, it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
The loss. Um, and then I lost my mum on Christmas Eve 2017. But again, I'd lost her about 5 years previously to dementia. And although she had a different form of dementia to my auntie, so she was lucid, and you could, she'd have good days and bad days, but she was still able to have a conversation with you and function and eat and everything. She was she became dependent upon me and other people, and I think that is for children, that is a lot. That is another form of loss, because this parent that has always been there for you and supported you, and you've always felt able to go to them if you had a problem.
Right. Yep.
They disappear, and you become the parents.
Yeah.
So my mum, I actually moved her up to Scotland because she'd lived independently until she was 88.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, she did it, incredible, because she'd had a number of health issues over the years. So she came up to Scotland, and then her actual passing was really, really very unexpected, very sudden. And she had a non-resuscitation order. But that is, I mean, I still think about this. In fact, I was thinking about it last night. I went with her wishes, but you still think, well, if I'd gone down that other route of them, in her case, it would have been to tube her, and because she'd aspirated her vomit, so she was very poorly, but my mum was a real fighter. And I still think, well, it is a difficult position to be in, to make that decision, although I wasn't making the decision, because I was going with this document that she had signed. And I know, my thinking at the time was, if she does survive, she is going to be less able than she currently is. And what quality of life would she have? And she has told me that expressly that this is the route that she wants me to take. And when my mum passed, I was with her for 2 weeks as she was gradually declining, and that was really difficult. But obviously, I was upset when she passed. But again, it was a case of heads down, let's get things organised. I mean, my mum had got all of her funeral organised and paid for, which honestly, I would 100% recommend that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that helps tremendously. But because of the time of year, it was delayed because it was Christmas time, and then the body was having to get transported down south for the funeral, and then there was talk of there being a post-mortem. I mean, it was a protracted process, but I was in, organised mode, plus the fact I was having to support my children who were very close to my mum. So I didn't fully grieve. I mean, the funeral was lovely in the sense that it was how she wanted it, and I spoke, and then two of my children spoke as well.
Wow.
And yes, I did. I was very upset, but I was I suppose I was very much like my mum. I was caring about everybody else. All her friends that were there, and people that she knew and that I kind of knew, and then obviously my children. And it's only been subsequently in the last couple of years that I've really, really felt immense sadness that my mum's not around anymore.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of my marriage broke down virtually immediately after my mum passed away, so I've been dealing with that, staying strong for my children. So yeah, it was it was a hard time, but
Yeah.
I had to remain strong for other people. And I'd not lived close to my mum all my adult life because I was in Scotland and she was still down in Suffolk. Um, so I didn't see her on a daily basis, or I saw her for longer periods of time, several times a year. But I really miss her,
Mm.
and yeah, I'm lucky that I can say, well, I am who I am thanks to her. I've got a lot of her traits and that. But yeah, we all deal with grief in different ways. I'm very pragmatic, very, just stiff upper lip, get on with it. Um,
I think
and
that's
I,
a really important thing, though, like that idea that we learn to grieve based on the people that we've had around us. So I'm
uh-huh,
just really struck by the fact that your early life experiences of loss, you've had your mum there to kind of guide you through them, and you've watched her navigate loss. And then
mm,
it's like when it came to time to grieve the loss of her, it's almost like you've followed in her footsteps with the stiff upper lip, and
yeah,
yep,
yeah, because my mum and dad had a Victorian upbringing, so there were certain things that you didn't talk about.
yep,
And they that was just the way they dealt with things.
yep.
I mean, there was never any talk of my late grandparents on my father's side. I wasn't allowed to talk about that,
Wow.
and I regret that now. Well, I regret's the wrong word because it wasn't my fault, but
Mm,
I would
mm,
like to know more about them,
mm.
and where I've come from genetically.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, but yeah, so I was coping with my mum's passing, and then 6 months later, my marriage broke down
Yeah. Wow.
completely out the blue, and that I would say, that kind of overshadowed the loss of my mum
Wow.
because I was having to um, be there for my kids,
Mm,
and yeah, it's been a tough period of life for
yeah.
sure. Um, but what would I say to people to give people advice? I think I would say that just recognizing that everybody's different in the way that they grieve,
Yeah.
and different losses affect people in different ways. So, for instance, there's one of the school mums that I knew from my children's primary school. I was friendly with her, but not close friendly.
Mm, mhm.
She passed away suddenly from cancer. Gosh, that must have been about 6 years ago, I suppose. And I went to the funeral with my son. I got incredibly upset at that funeral.
Mm,
And I think potentially that was some of that pent up grief from my mum passing away. And then last year, my ex mother in law passed away. Now, I wasn't close to her, um, and but my children were involved in well, my boys carried the coffin, and then my
mm,
daughter was there, and I got incredibly upset there. And I think again, I was thinking about my mum and her funeral, um, and I was also I was sad for my children because I could see how upset they were. And then I also met up with people from her extended family who I'd not been close to, but I used to see them at all family gatherings,
mm.
and I hadn't seen them since my marriage broke down. And that is when a relationship broke down. We spoke about this briefly. It's not just about losing your marriage or your partnership. It's about
Yeah.
you're losing all this extended family and friends. So I saw them and they welcomed me,
Wow.
gave me
Yeah.
hugs, and And that was just such a, I suppose it was a relief in a way to
Mm,
think
hmm.
that, they still wanted to have something to do with me. And it was just so lovely to see them again.
To see
It's
them.
sad that we
Yeah.
see people that we've not seen for ages at funerals, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then um, after that funeral, I wasn't originally going to the wake, but my ex-brother-in-law invited me along, went along to that, and I was there support for my kids,
Mm, hmm.
because I could see how they were hurting and their cousins. And we were just sitting on the table, and I suppose I went into practical mum mode, and we were reminiscing, and we were having some tears, we were having some laughs. So yeah, I was, supporting them through their grief. Uh,
I think
so
you
yeah.
said something really important there as well, Andrea, about like something I'm always really interested in is that grief is like a whole body experience, and I think we can understand loss in a really cognitive sense, and that we get why we're sad when somebody important
Mm-hmm.
to us has died. But you said really something really quite important there about, when the kind of school mum passed, and that real sense of like almost overwhelming grief at somebody that you maybe
Mm,
didn't feel all that close to. And I think something I've witnessed over the years is the sense that your body knows what grief feels like as well. So although it doesn't
mm,
know necessarily the kind of circumstance of why we're feeling that way in that moment, it's like there's a felt sense of grief. And I think
mm,
when you've experienced profound grief, the loss of
mm,
somebody really important, any other losses after that, we feel it in a very visceral sense. So,
mm,
it makes a lot of sense that that real sadness shows up in you know, times that might feel a wee bit out of place, but it's like your body's
mm.
remembering what that feeling of loss
Yeah.
is like.
And I think as well for me, I just think about her children
Yeah,
and her partner, and them being left behind, and thinking, how are they going to navigate life
yeah,
without that key person,
yeah.
you know um and maybe people were looking at me and thinking, well, how is Andrea going to navigate life without her mum?
Mm, hmm.
But I didn't even consider that myself, because
Yeah.
I was like, right, just get on with life,
Mm,
because other people around you need you.
mm,
So yeah, it's an interesting, like you say, it's an interesting thing, grief, because I find there's certain movies that I get
mm, hmm.
really upset about, and it's a genuine, you're so involved in the story and the people, that you, like you say, is that feeling that your body experiences,
Yeah,
even though logically you're telling yourself, well, this isn't real,
yeah.
you still experience that. And reading a book as well, that can happen, you
I'm
know.
I'm smiling as you're saying that because it's just triggered a memory for me. So I was bereaved as a child, and I remember this really vivid memory of sitting watching Titanic when it first came out, and it was on
Mm-hmm.
video in my house when me and my mum were watching it. And I remember her pausing the video and being like, "Why are you so upset? Like, what is that? What's wrong? Like, it's just a movie."
Mm,
But it was that real felt sense of like the sadness that the characters' stories and
mm,
just really resonated. I couldn't have verbalized it. I was what 12 or 13 at the time. I couldn't have
mm,
verbalized it, but my body knew that sadness and I felt it in a way that
mm,
I could see my mum looking at me like, what the hell is going on here? Like, what's wrong with you? This is just a film. But it's so true that, media, films, movies, whatever it is you're consuming can really
mm,
trigger that feeling of just overwhelming grief.
mm. And I mean, when I have experienced profound grief, is when I've lost a dog.
Mm,
Um, and people who don't have pets don't always appreciate the impact that can have upon you.
absolutely.
And um, yeah, I mean, I kind of felt a little bit guilty that I felt more upset when I lost my first dog than when my dad passed away.
Mm, hmm.
And I think that was partly, well, she was like my baby. It was before I had children.
Yeah.
I was so emotionally invested in her, and I suppose I was reliant upon her being there for me emotionally.
Yeah.
Oops. And then yeah, so I've lost three dogs in my lifetime, my own dogs.
Your own ones.
And each time, oh, it's just been heart-wrenching. And, I've always said, oh, well, I'll have two dogs so that if you lose one, at least, there's one there. I've now got three dogs, would you believe? But it doesn't get any easier for me, So
I think the thing with dogs and animals in general, though, is like they're so unconditional. Like relationships with
mm,
people are complicated, even if it's the most
mm,
loving, uncomplicated relationship. There's still times where they've said or done things that have upset us, or there'll still be memories of difficult things. But, with animals, it's just so simple and so
yeah,
uncomplicated that it's like, yeah, it's that strength of connection that you're just like, oh,
definitely.
hmm
Yeah. So those are my, experience loss of humans and loss of um animals. Um
Is there
so
anything that, like, where you are today, obviously, kind of looking back and thinking about your different journeys through loss, is there anything that you would feel has really helped you in those journeys, or anything that, if you were back at square one, redoing these journeys, is there anything you would do differently, anything you would do more of? I always think that's really helpful for people to hear, like, what's
mm,
helped you along the way.
I mean, I suppose I was lucky with my mum being the way that she was, being very pragmatic. I think in terms of my mum passing away, I would have, um, gosh, had a menopause moment there. A thought came into my head, and because other thoughts came in, it's gone whoosh.
It'll circle back around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I just think, what would I have done differently with my mum? I think, well, no, the approach that I've taken with my mum, especially with my children, is talking about my mum
Mm,
and talking about happy and fun memories and funny things that we did together, because I think that keeps her alive in the kids' memory and in my memory.
yeah.
um, and also my mum was very good with photographs, with
Ah,
albums,
okay.
and I've kind of continued that as well. So being able to look back at photographs of my mum,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
my mum with the children in particular, because my mum became a grandparent in her 80s, and I think she'd given up all hope of ever becoming a grandparent. And we had some really fun times together with her
Mm,
before the dementia kicked in, So just being able to refer back to that has been really, really important.
yeah.
And I've stayed in touch with some of my mum's friends as well, who
Oh, lovely.
still live down south. And yeah, I've got one of her, well, she's got one remaining cousin who stays down in Bath. So I keep in touch with her. So in some ways, I feel I'm kind of keeping things alive for
Yeah.
my mum. Doing what my mum would have wanted. I used to send Christmas cards to her friends as well.
Mm,
Until the last couple of years, I haven't done that. But yeah, that's kind of the way I've dealt with it.
mm,
It I suspect it would have been different had I not had the marriage breakup in between.
mhm.
I would have had sort of the traditional amount of time to grieve. What is the traditional amount of time, but that period immediately after somebody passing away,
Yeah.
whereas I didn't have the luxury of that really. So yeah, uh,
Yeah.
I strongly recommend people to being pragmatic,
Okay.
have power of attorney,
Yes. Yeah.
because I had power of attorney for my aunt and I had power of attorney for my mum. And oh my goodness, that just makes life so much easier. And then also, if planning funeral beforehand, because my mum, after my auntie passed away, my mum used to say to me, well, I'm getting my funeral all sorted and blah blah blah. And I'm like, Mum, stop being so, that's depressing. I don't want to hear about that. But do you know what? I was so pleased that she'd done that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's on my to-do list.
I am an eternal advocate of that, Andrea, because I think, again, I see it often that for people who have a death that's unexpected, where
Mm,
family maybe haven't expressed what they've wanted. I
mm,
really heard what you said earlier on about, like, with your dad, you were left in that position of not really knowing what he wanted, not really knowing what was the right thing to do. And it's like,
mm,
I think it's such a simple thing for us to do in life that can just make such a big difference to those people
mm,
that are left behind. And personally, I've got a bit of a kind of a soapbox moment of, like, I think when people have children, they really should be forced at that point almost to, like, get your will in order, have power of
yes.
attorney set up, think about documenting what you want, because sadly for children, adult children, it's them that are left to make these big decisions, and
Mm,
often in families where nobody talks about death, nobody's said what they wanted or didn't want. So
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I that was what I was going to say about having a will for sure. And I mean, because there's so many choices nowadays as
Yeah,
well regarding what can happen. I mean, I work part time for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, and they have a body donation program at the university,
amazing.
Glasgow University. And I think, oh gosh, that is a really, really, you know, for me, that is a practical option,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know. Um, so yeah, it's and I mean, I'm an only child, and I've experienced loss of, my parents on my own. So I have three children, they're adopted, and when we adopted them, um, I was adamant that they wouldn't be just the one
Mm.
because I know how difficult it was on my own to support my mum. And I'm just hopeful that they're still talking to each other. They'll come together and, support each other when the time arises.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's something huge in that, isn't there, about, like, when you've had that experience of having to do it on your own, having
Mm,
to make sense of it. It's like, gosh, if you can prevent somebody else being in that position, then gosh, you've really gone above and beyond to make sure that your kids aren't in that position.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's, my my experience and my the way I've handled things and the way I've the sort of practical suggestions I would make to people. I think as well as you get older, you feel lost far more, because all your things that you've grown up with, the people you've grown up with, whether they be people that are local to you or people that are on TV or in the press, they're all gradually disappearing. And I remember my parents talking about it. And when you're young, you think, "I right, whatever," but it's so
hmm
true. It's when somebody passes, that's a mini loss for you because it's a
absolutely.
loss of what was part of your past.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. I remember my aunt who died a few years ago, but she was well into her 80s and had lived a really remarkable life. But I remember her saying to me at one point, just had enough now, Hen. It's like all of our
Mm,
kind of close friends had passed. She was the eldest of her siblings, so she kind of,
mm,
I think she knew in herself that she was kind of getting
mm,
towards the end of life, although she was well to all intents and purposes. But it's one of those conversations that's always really stayed with me and struck me at the time that, she'd lived her life, she'd had fun, she'd done all the things that she
mm,
wanted to do, and she was like, just had enough now, Hen. And you think, gosh,
mm,
that must be something to, have lost pretty much all of the people that were really significant in her world,
mm.
and still be, there getting up every morning doing life. So yeah, it must be hard.
Yeah, yeah, that is very interesting actually, because when my when my mum had her last big fall before she came up to Scotland, I was faced with the decision of should I bring her up to Scotland or should I leave her and put her in a home down south?
Oh, okay.
And I thought, well, all her friends are passing away, so who's going to visit her?
Yeah.
And, as you get older and the people that you've known pass away, and, you're, I don't know how to describe it, sort of your peer group, isn't it? The people that
Mm-hmm.
you can relate to,
Mm-hmm.
they become fewer and fewer. And then obviously the younger people, how do you relate to them? Unless you're a grandparent, but then still that can be difficult because your experience of life is so different to theirs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just going to have loads of dogs.
A house full of dogs. Yes.
That's it, because they don't care what age you are, do
No,
they?
not a care. Not a care.
And I mean, I've got one of my dogs was a puppy when my mum was in the nursing home. And he was hyper, but then whenever he went to see her, he just used to sit on her lap and was no bother at all. So they're
Yeah.
very, very intuitive. So yeah, dogs. Dogs are the answer.
They're the answer. Yeah, absolutely. Andrea,
Yeah.
thank you so much for this conversation today. I think it's been so interesting, some of the different kind of aspects that have come through in terms of your experience of loss. And I loved what you
Mm,
said about just that nature of grief being so individual and how there's such a pragmatic bit to it as well, of like there's the doing part of grief, there's the stuff
mhm,
that just has to get done. And then, it's finding space for the emotions that come with that as well. So thank you for,
mm,
sharing and kind of giving us some insight and some learnings
mm.
from your different lessons as well.
Yeah. There's one final thing I'd like to
Sure.
say, which I've seen things on social media about this. My mum was always telling me about stuff that had happened to her in her life. And when I was younger, it was like, it goes in one ear and out the other. And I think now I wish I had that recorded,
Ah, okay. Uh-huh.
So I would say if you can, journal and obviously
Capture
not
things.
just capture key information, because at some point that will be of interest to the younger generation, you know.
I'm
So yeah.
sure I've seen recently that I think it might have been in like Waterstones or somewhere like that, but there
Mm,
was there was a book that was essentially like a journal that a parent could fill out about
yeah,
their life experiences to then pass on to,
yeah,
their kids. And it was one of those moments where I was like, gosh, it'd be such a lovely gift to receive as well from somebody who'd taken the time to maybe fill it out and tell you, their favourite foods or, their
yeah,
biggest experiences in their childhood and stuff. Because as you say, it's like those are comments often that happen in passing, and then before you know it, they're gone. You kind of go back
yeah,
and ask those questions. So yeah,
definitely.
brilliant idea.
Okay.
Going to wrap us up then just by saying that if you have
Mm,
found this episode helpful, if you think it would be useful to somebody you know, then please do like it, share it, spread the word, help us to get it out there. Do make sure that you subscribed, and that way you'll get updates to any new episodes as they're released. And lastly, you can connect with me on Facebook or Instagram, which is at Continuum Counselling. And also, I'm going to ask Andrea, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to reach out to you, where do they find you online?
so probably the easiest way is my website is andreaclareart.uk, but I will also provide you with the links to my various channels
Socials, awesome. And we'll get
on
them on
Facebook
the
and Instagram. Yeah.
Perfect. We'll get them on the show notes as well. So yeah, as always, would love to hear any feedback, anything that's resonated for you. And yeah, just again, one last time, just to say a massive thank you, Andrea, for your time and for your energy and bringing in your wisdom to our time today.
You're very welcome. Thank
Thank
you.
you.